So we were talking about this paper, this article from Joseph M. Riegel on w3.org back in the 90s, where he defined the term social protocol. And let me see if I can find his definition. He says that it is a way of using metadata and negotiation to control the interactions one has with others on the internet. And so we're thinking that idea of negotiation is very important. A social protocol involves some sort of agreement with other people about how attention, for example, will be allocated within an online community or within a social platform. But it's not a one-way thing. Filters and recommendation engines are one way. They allow you to control your interactions with people, but there's no protocol. There's no negotiation or an agreement involved. So I like that idea of negotiation. And if we talk about rules, for the definition we gave in the Canonical Debate Lab Trello board is rules that determine certain outcomes. And those are rules that have been, in a sense, negotiated. When you join a platform, you agree with others that we're going to allocate attention, or certain things on this platform will happen according to the rules that have been defined on the platform. And then I was saying how every time you post something in a social platform, you're making a claim on other people's attention. And people are aware of that, and they don't necessarily post things. Often people hesitate to post things because they don't know if they should make that claim. They don't know if people will be interested. And it's like, if you go out into a room full of people and you just start talking and take up everybody's attention, it's not a cool thing to do, and people don't want to do that because they recognize it's harmful and it makes you look bad. And so the same thing happens with all your social media interactions. You consider the context, you consider the room, read the room, you have some idea based on your knowledge of the algorithms and the platform rules, who is likely to see those posts, and you think, do they want to see this picture of my kids or of my, of me surfing or whatever it may be? And I find that I hardly post at all because I have extreme doubts about whether I should be making claims on people's attention. And sometimes when I post something online, it's to a very specific place where there's very specific people that I think for whatever reason would be interested. I was talking about how my mother sends picture of the day emails. And she uses this old-fashioned technology email, but it's sort of appropriate because she has a specific group of people that she thinks really is interested in these pictures, family pictures, and she's right. So she's making a claim on our attention, and it's really kind of a bold claim to put something in somebody's email box. It's a bigger claim than just posting something on Twitter, where people may or may not see it. When you send someone an email, you're saying, hey, I think you should see this. I'm claiming your attention. So kind of thinking about loud, but I think considering in the design of social protocols what kind of claims people are making on other people's attention and how they think about that is interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's interesting because it's very much in line with something that Felix and I also sort of independently thought about with how social networks facilitate this information overload thing. So where I conceptualize it as everyone has like a bucket, which is the volume of the attention that they can allocate to the content that gets processed. And whenever you send a message or you create a post, your information is sent along all the edges of your node in the network. And the higher your edge count or the higher your node degree, the more times your message gets multiplied and the more volume within the attention buckets you occupy. Mm-hmm. And if you then incentivize people creating a lot of messages for and making them more successful in terms of edge count. You have like a feedback loop where people post more and more, and the people who post more get more edges, and then their messages are even multiplied more. And at some point you have to curate the content in the bucket, basically. So you have to decide what goes into the bucket, and that's where like algorithms like the Twitter algorithm or recommendation engines come in.
Yep. You need to filter because there's too many, there's too much information. Yeah.
And then on the other hand, like I like the way your what was it, your mom does it with emails? Yeah, it's targeted. Like
Yep.
And email does exactly that, like, or messaging in general. It targets specific people and puts something specific into their buckets, but it's not like you're not sending an email out to 10,000 people. You're just sending out to a few.
Yeah.
Who you think that might be interested in your content. Yeah.
Yep. And I wonder if there are other ways of targeting that tap into another protocol. So I guess email is a social protocol in that sense. And there's a rule for allocating attention. The rules are, if I send an email to you, it's going to show up in your inbox, and unless you filtered me out in some way. But is there a way, for example, to target specific people without making such a claim on their attention? So another example is I'm involved in different family groups where we talk about family things, but sometimes somebody posts just a funny or interesting video. So why are they posting in that particular family group and not on, say, Facebook? And it's because they think in particular this family group or this friend group would be interested in this. They may or may not be right about that. But if it's like a WhatsApp group, there's an alert for a lot of people. So that's part of the protocol, and you understand that when you're making a bigger claim on people's attention using chat than email, I think, because it
depends on the people. Most people I know, like if they're in a group, they mute immediately.
Yep. So that's important to understand is
Yeah.
and especially because people can abuse, and so everyone's thinking about that when they send, they're guessing how annoyed or how much people might be by this or how much they want to see it. But I wonder if there's other protocols where you can tag things or somehow route things that certain people might be interested in, but that make lesser claims on their attention. For example, a family group on a social network where it doesn't show up, where it's things where it doesn't even need to show up in your email box. You're not making that big of a claim, but it is things that you think they might be interested in, and that complete strangers totally wouldn't be interested in. So more like a bulletin board, where you might check every week, and it's understood that people will check every week, or just infrequently, and or not at all. And there's some things they won't see, and that's okay.
But I think then there's no difference in the attention overload, because if you say, okay, it's okay, everybody should check every week, then it's the same as sending an email every week.
Yeah, maybe. But then there's a difference between things where you're saying, hey, look at this, and hey, you don't necessarily need to look at this at all. It's, or a place where you post jokes. So for example, maybe in Slack, there's, in just about every Slack group I've been a part of, there's some group, channel somebody creates for random stuff, cat pictures, and I never check that, and nobody expects me to, and that's okay. But it's also targeted. It's things that particular Slack community might be interested in.
Yeah. What I've also been thinking about is you could also allocate a cost to claiming people's attention.
Yeah.
So not necessarily with a real like currency, in-game currency basically in the system, but more like something like resource that you have to burn. and it's proportional to the amount of people that you target, and the amount of people who you're able to target, maybe. So if you're in a social network, the more followers you have, the more you have to burn to target people, or to send your message out to people.
Burn fossil fuels.
Yeah, basically.
To target people, yeah.
I
mean, that's advertising, right?
Yeah.
Just not that the money gets into our pockets, it gets into the marketplace.
So that makes me think, how do you earn those tokens besides just paying for advertising? And one thought there is, often when people post things on social media, there can be seen as creating value, as well as making claims on people's attention. And sometimes advertising, you need to pay more because you're creating less value. But then there's, for example, there's these new, what's like Substack, where people are paying for your content. And so I envision social platforms, more and more social platforms. There's also Steam, the cryptocurrency-based social network that does the same thing. People make money, or can gain tokens at least, by posting content that a lot of people like. They're saying, this is a good use of my attention. And then maybe there's a platform where you can earn tokens in that way. And then you can use those tokens to boost content that might not otherwise be something that that a lot of people like and click, and that it might not otherwise go viral.
Yeah, what I was thinking about was more that you have something like, I think even fossil fuels is a good analogy, because you have to burn it, and so you have to be aware of the responsibility that you have with creating your content. And so the idea was everyone is allocated the same amount of coal to burn, basically. And the more, or the amount of coal that you have to burn to post a message is like, it's proportional to the amount of followers that you have. So the more followers you get, the more you have to think about what you post. So if you post a message, you really have to make it count. So it depicts the number of times that your message is copied when you send it along a number of edges.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
So I've really, at first I thought that was basically an in-game currency, but it's not. It's more like a resource that you destroy or that you burn.
And would the resource be allocated over time, like every day?
Maybe something like that.
And maybe if it's unused, it decays slowly or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're brainstorming right now, I think there should be a goal. Because like we're just saying, oh, okay, it could be this way, but like, what's the goal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the social protocol in essence? So which social protocol are we talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, if we talk about attention allocation, it's like you could say, okay, people have a certain amount of attention volume and a certain interest, and they should get not too much, and exactly that for exactly what they want and how much attention they have, and it should be super targeted. And if it doesn't appear like noise to them, then it's good. And there are different ways to achieve that. It doesn't say anything about it's a follower system or not, and so on. Could still be email.
So I guess I might respond to the question of what the goal is with what's the problem. And of course, there's been a lot of talk these days about problems with social platforms. And if we think of social platforms as kind of essentially attention allocation engines, what we're saying is that the way they allocate attention is not good for society. And I think the paradigm is give people things that they like or things that the advertisers want them to see. And I think we're recognizing that that's not necessarily the best protocol for society. So the question is, what's a better protocol?
I mean, you could also ask like, which information should spread? And the community decides collaboratively.
Yep. What information should spread and what kind of interactions are healthy?
I think it also depends on the reason people allocate their attention. So you can make a distinction there. Sometimes people, so the tasks that people perform are different. Like there's discovery and search, and maybe maintaining social relationships. It depends. I don't know.
And another desirable thing that we've talked about in the past is creating common mental models. And that's not necessarily what people are trying to do when they're using. So I think there's positive outcomes being somewhat paternalistic, but as a designer of a social platform, we need to say not just what people want, we need to consider what people want, because ultimately these platforms should be tools and that are not manipulating people, but they should also be designed very transparently to produce positive social outcomes, I think.
I mean, that's with the shared mental models. I think that's why Hacker News makes it a point to have only one front page and no tagging system, so that your community isn't split. And it's really interesting because I've been looking into what's the other news aggregator called.
Well, there's others. There's Slashdot. That's kind of old.
Reddit, you mean?
I think Slashdot. I mean, Reddit, of course, is split into different communities, but or very specialized. But I think it's Slashdot, which does tagging as well, right?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't used it for a while.
But I haven't looked into it deeply enough to make a statement about it. But I think it may be a reason that it's not as popular.
Is the tagging?
Yeah, I don't know.
So on the other hand, Reddit isn't just a news aggregator, but it's similar in a lot of ways, and it's extremely popular. And that's because even though each community maybe is small or smaller, there's a lot of communities.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the Hacker News would be one subreddit if it was in the Reddit ecosystem. It was like the r/tech people or something.
True. Yeah, and Reddit is super fragmented. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another desirable outcome is instead of fragmentation into smaller communities, including communities where you get a bit of a breeding ground for extreme views. Would it be possible for Reddit to define their social protocols that led towards more of a convergence of views, maybe even with the process, for example, of merging communities or of transfer of karma across communities or conversation across communities. So there's another desirable outcome I was talking about with Stephen, is creation. We talked about creation of common mental models at the interfaces, especially, common definition of terms, what exactly a claim means, and what believing in this claim, and what implications that A has for B believing B, and that what implications B has for believing C, and therefore allowing this idea of distributed reasoning. But then I think another related positive outcome is just social groups having shared mental models of the world or a shared reality, common understanding of what the facts are, and And I think that divergence is, in my country, I think it's very disturbing, the divergence, and I think it's going to create problems. I'm not sure how it is in Germany, but I suspect all the
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it lags behind America a year or two usually, but yeah, it's equally split. And every issue, it was actually quite interesting to observe during the beginning of the pandemic, because people needed about a month or two to decide where on the issue each political party would stand.
yeah.
So for 2 months, it was amazingly unpolarized. Like there was
Yeah.
very much a shared, or it seemed like there was much less polarization than usually. But then they basically ordered themselves into the different things, and then since then it's completely stable, and everybody's screaming at each other.
Yeah, I think that it could have gone the other way. Maybe it was inevitable, but it seems like it's partly the polarization process is partly what do you call it, path dependent. It could have been that, and I saw early indications, for example, that conservatives were really into masks, and they were the one that were buying the masks. Conservative values and are often really stress preparedness for disasters, and it was more liberal voices saying, "Don't use the masks. We need them. They don't work. We need them for healthcare workers." And it actually kind of flipped quickly. But I think that's because it, the grain of polarization, or little crystal, was still small, and could flip very quickly. But eventually, it stabilized and grew, and now it can't.
Yeah. I think actually, so my hypothesis is that polarization is not the problem, but the formation of consensus is too quick. So if usually what you get nowadays is political groups that are very homogeneous within the group, but they are very separated from other groups. So you have political factions where you have a clear semantic structure of content or allocation of values to different societal topics. And it's very stable. So if you ask two people from one group, they are very likely to say the same things about that. And so my hypothesis is that the high interconnectedness creates consensus too quickly. So you get social cues from other people all the time, and it goes very quickly that you see what your in-group thinks.
Right. Okay.
But I think that's because they already share a kind of a mental model. That doesn't have to be
Probably.
right. It's just like that they share it.
But if it took longer, I think it wouldn't come to this separation of groups. Like the divergence would not progress so fast. And it's also, I mean, most of the people that I know that are very highly active in group, out group thinking are very active on social media too.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I had an interesting experience. I met with a relative who was very active on social media and posted a lot of pretty polarizing content. And then it was an uncle I hadn't seen in many years, and I was traveling in his part of the world, and we sat down and talked. And in a face-to-face conversation, he seemed much more moderate than he does on social media. And I realize people are different people on social media than they are in person. And, in fact, people are different people in every social context. They present themselves in different ways, which also, very quickly, related to social protocols, I feel like I would like to be able to present different facets of my personality to different groups. So the facet of my personality that's interested in pictures of plants or whatever it is, most people in my life don't care about that at all, and don't want to. So I don't post it. I don't post much to social media, but that's partly why, because I think why all my followers are going to see all this stuff that they're not interested in. But I want to be able to present that facet of my life in the appropriate place. And so as for other goals of social protocols, I think one of them is to allow us to do that.
Do you guys remember Google Plus? That they had this idea with circles.
Yeah. It really was a major failure, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know why it was a failure. Like, didn't they meet certain metrics, or
maybe it's just hard to make critical mass.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they forced you to, or they tried to use the YouTube network effect to get people on Google Plus. So at some point, I think you had to synchronize your YouTube account with a Google Plus account. So you couldn't use YouTube without using Google Plus, and everybody hated that because they were. I don't want to
a lot of people off. So
yeah.
Probably is what not the system that was bad, but just like how they forced it onto people.
Yeah. I think there's so many mistakes you can make. To be a big unicorn social network, you have to do everything right and be very lucky and have the right timing and do a lot of things right.
Yeah, and these effects that you can't easily switch from one network to another when it serves a similar purpose is also pretty fascinating.
Yep.
So
So now that the incumbents are kind of like a public utility, Twitter is like the public square. They went and they built the public square, and now they're in the middle of cyberspace, and it's where people meet and make their public announcements and have conversations, and it does make me wonder, at what point does the society have a claim, even though it's private property? At what point do they have a claim like they have with the utility companies, to regulate that, that monopoly? Because it's not going to be possible to create, we're not going to just dig a whole bunch of trenches to lay down new power and sewer and electrical lines, so that we can compete. And that's just not going to happen. I think it's the same sort of thing. Of course, I very much doubt government regulation could do any good. But one of my goals in philosophizing about social protocols and how they could be designed to have better outcomes is if whatever changes are made, whether it's through government pressure or regulation, or through a paradigm shift in the way these platforms think about their strategy and responsibility to society, I think I hope to maybe develop some technologies, or at least some ideas that could have some positive influence.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah, me too. I've been thinking about what could come out of all of this, because the more I've been thinking about the notion of a social protocol, the more I realize that almost everything is a social protocol. Like, you can look at many things of human interaction, and many of them, yet they just fit the definition.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can have after all of this is like a set of open source protocols that anyone can implement.
Yeah.
Because what seems to work is like this federated approach to social media or social software in general. If you think about the Fediverse and movements that are more distributed.
But I think it's still only a high quality community because it doesn't achieve the critical mass yet.
yeah, the eternal September.
Because it's still a follower system as far as I know, right?
I mean, the Fediverse is there. It's very diverse in terms of services. So there's the Twitter clone or Twitter-like thing, Mastodon and PeerTube, and
saw something called Lenny, which is like a news aggregator built on top of it. Yeah, I see a lot of potential there for it. Strategically, I see potential for a company to come in and do to the Fediverse what Google did to the web, which was to kind of become the front page, so to speak. For example, the Fediverse, I don't think has a great search engine. It doesn't have great moderation tools, and so I think maybe somebody just creating a competitor to Mastodon, or even forking Mastodon and hosting an instance, but that provides great really great search, federation, and discovery.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, I think what they're usually doing right now is just copying the existing social media platforms like Twitter, and they are basically transferring the problems of Twitter into the federated realm.
Yep.
So creating open source protocols or like free protocols that anyone can use that just make better incentives for a more healthy social interactions. That might be one of the goals that we can set for the social protocols thing.
I mean, like for Hacker News, right? We just say, okay, this is how a news aggregator formula could look like. Feel free to implement, but anybody else can still use it. Yeah.
And I'd love to actually at some point implement something that, you know, generates a large enough community that maybe doesn't necessarily take down Facebook, but that's big enough that it proves the concept. And I think that that might be possible, especially if you target some niche where people actively recognize the need for better protocols and are looking for solutions. I'm thinking, for example, there's the liquid democracy and direct democracy movements, and there's people trying to create platforms and even trying to run, some local governments or organizations. There's an idea or governance for blockchains. So anything related to group decision making and governance, I think there's an opportunity there. I think there might be some specialized online communities like the effective altruism community, where a platform that allowed them to have more productive discussions, decide, have arguments where the system helps them determine, what really is logically the best way to allocate capital. I was thinking even decision support systems for corporations. Maybe local
now we're too broad again.
Well, I don't really know what. There's gazillions of possibilities.
Yeah. I think we should. A good thing would be to finish the news aggregator problem, because that's like one of the simplest ones, I think.
And it's a proof of concept of the approach of how to analyze these things and come up with a protocol, maybe.
So, but in what context would? So you're saying finish the article?
Yeah, not just the article, but like actually, like be good enough that the whole Hacker News community approves it and think it's a good idea, and then it gets actually implemented.
Yeah, I'd be.
And research wise, the news aggregator protocol is much simpler than social media protocol, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
True. Yep. And in fact, it could even be Reddit too. And I think it's probably worth reading that article from Evan Miller dissecting the Reddit.
Yeah, I put it on my big reading list.
Yeah, it's really pretty. Seems pretty sophisticated analysis.
Yeah, I mean, he's also the author of one of those very, very famous articles about sorting. I think it's called "How Not to Sort about
average rating."
Yeah.
He talks about the Wilson score. He also talks about Bayesian averaging in some of his articles. He's got several related articles.
Maybe we should contact him and ask him to talk with us.
That's a great idea. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just another person on the internet you can talk to.
Yeah.
Why don't we send him a link to this video? Other social protocol discussions.
Yeah. Anyways, Hacker News article. We wanted to show you. Do you have it handy, Johannes, right now?
Yes, I have it. I have it here, and I also worked on it today a little bit, so I have something that I can show you.
Perfect.
So I'm going to share my screen. Maybe to bring you up to speed, Jonathan. Oh no, that's the wrong one. I think I have it here somewhere. No, I haven't. I switched off my computer before. So yeah, should I just go through it and bring you up to speed?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea because I wouldn't know where to start right now.
Yeah, because we did a lot in the past couple of weeks. So I think we already showed you the how we looked into the feedback and what the important feedbacks were.
Mhm.
And recently we reconceptualized the feedback loop problem. So
Okay.
if we start the argument from scratch, basically, so just start from the beginning. So we used to say, here it said rank, here it said age and upvotes, but we switched this into score, basically, because that's what the Hacker News formula is more or less. So age has a negative effect on ranking score and upvotes has a positive effect.
Mhm.
And yeah, what the exponents mean, we already talked about that. So this is how the feedback loops looks right now. It's we added this factor ranking score, and this leads to higher rank, this leads to higher impressions, this leads to upvotes, and click-throughs is actually just a distraction. So it's not the right metric for our purpose, and impressions was actually the right one that probably, because we have two positive arrows here, it's depicted in this arrow already. So this is just a distraction, and it was probably.
It's a mediator. It's
Yeah.
a term used in causal inference. Yeah.
And so to simplify it, I think it's more productive to look at it just with the impressions.
All right.
And
so I think that graph actually is great because it, especially the use of colors, makes the explicit factors and the separate from the other factors.
The color encodes that these are the ones that are in the formula and these are the ones that are implicit, like you said. Although I think we may also have to distinguish between factors that we know and ones that we don't know, because rank is something that we know and impressions is something that we don't know.
You might say rank is also explicit in that it's totally controlled by Hacker News, but then impressions is well, there's other factors besides rank that determine impressions.
And also we don't want to measure it because we don't want to include client-side tracking. So this probably remains implicit. But yeah, go on.
Just a idea that came to my mind. Like, isn't impressions more prone to clickbait more than click-throughs? Actually, I know, because impression is a negative feedback. So if it's shown and nobody clicks on it and doesn't upload, it could be. I think it's more prone to clickbait, actually. But what do you think?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
So with regard to that diagram, you mean?
No, in general, like, I'm just wondering, because we said, okay, if we have a negative feedback that somehow represents attention, wouldn't we also solve the clickbait problem, that like something with a very good title is clicked on more often, but then gets fewer votes? And this clicked on more often is basically something I don't get it together in my mind right now. Just wondering.
Yeah, well, so one thing that's not shown here is quality. So impressions and quality of the title and quality of the content.
Right.
And so you would need to add back click-throughs and a high quality title would also be an arrow going into click-throughs. And then upvotes, it would be high quality content would be an arrow going into upvotes. And actually, you could drop the arrow from impressions to upvotes in that case, because impressions is not a direct cause of upvotes. Oh, unless people just upvote without clicking. So yeah, I guess it is. Impressions and quality of title also is an arrow going into upvotes. So that there's a lot more arrows that you could add.
Yeah.
Also,
I mean, I just had an idea, because what we did then was basically so we weren't sure how to operationalize impressions. So how do we find a proxy for it? And so we thought, instead of finding a proxy for it, we add another factor, which is expected votes. So we basically compute from historical data how much votes we would expect a story to get on a specific rank on the top page, and add a negative feedback from expected votes to score. So if you think about this as a ratio, the ratio of how many votes a story actually gets and how many votes are expected, that's our signal for quality, basically.
okay.
So if you merge those two bubbles, and then you have basically impressions. No.
But we just said we don't have impressions at all. And what you suggested, Jonathan, was like, okay, was it? I don't know who suggested it, whatever. Expected votes is actually our weighted impressions. It's exactly the same. And and then Johannes started to think about, okay, why don't we think from the direction of expected votes instead of trying to find something that measures impressions?
Yeah. Okay.
Impressions.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't need to calculate impressions.
It's basically just a mediator between rank and votes and rank and expected votes. In this case.
Yeah, I absolutely. So, yep. Yeah, so I think you just need an arrow from rank to expected votes. And expected votes is not what is expected for that particular article. It's just that's what is expected
for that particular rank.
That rank, yep.
And at that particular time of day and that particular weekday.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and the rank is always changing. So really, what you kind of have is like an integral, of total expected votes over
the history of ranks.
Yeah. So we called it cumulative expected votes, I think. Although here we still call it impressions, I think.
Yep.
Oh no, we already said that it's cumulative expected votes. So for every 15 seconds, we see which rank a story is on, and then we calculate how many votes we would expect it to get and add that to the expected upvotes. So this ratio of upvotes to expected upvotes basically gains information with time, so it becomes better.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we just have the problem: how do we rank it? Because we don't want to just sort by the ratio, because we don't know the information content of it.
But we know it gets better over time. And if we did a mistake, if it's too high, then it just collects more information. Okay.
Are you alluding to the possibility of having sampling error from small amounts of data?
Yeah. Essentially, so we made it clear with an example when, I don't know where it is. When
we just said like a whole new section needs to go into the whole Bayesian ranking, or the Bayesian average, or the other metrics.
Yep. And Wilson score can also work. One thing that's important is that insight I have is Wilson score works when the expected ratios are very low. And so now you're talking about an integral, so I need to kind of get my head around that, but it still might work. Your ratios are going to be, your ratios are not going to be.
It's basically just two increasing numbers.
Yeah. And those will keep on increasing. Yeah, I need to think about that.
If you think
it's a bit different from the average, like when you take 5-star ratings, for example, and the number of votes, then it's still kind of similar if you say I'm collecting stars, and the total number of stars divided by total number of ratings, then you have the average stars per rating. So it's pretty similar.
So one way of looking at it is if you get one I still need to think about it. Definitely, if you only gotten one vote, or you don't have a lot of data, and so your certainty, by the time you have like thousands of votes, you probably have enough data. But also, if you haven't had a lot of time, you also don't have enough data. So the more time that goes on, even if you only had one vote, the more time you've gone with only one vote, the more certain. And so there should be an Bayesian approach that actually, changes the value as time increases, even if votes don't increase.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes total sense to have a Bayesian approach to that, because what we are basically, the ratio, every 15 seconds, we sample one instance of the ratio of upvotes to expected upvotes.
Right. Yeah, and the granularity of the sampling even, I think, could affect the Bayesian approach. So
I
think about how to build a model. What's interesting about the Bayesian averaging formula is dirt simple, but that comes out of an analysis of a more complex model where you have a prior probability distribution. And I need to think about how to set up that model. I'm not an expert at it, but it's something I've been studying, and I read the book, and so that'd be an interesting challenge for me to see if I can think about how to model that.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, sorry?
I really like that formula. It's very simple. Cumulative votes divided by cumulative expected votes. That's great. That's it's intuitive. Seems right.
But
yeah,
we say, what I came to realize is that when you have cumulative expected votes or impressions or whatever, because it's very similar, we also have another measure of time here, right? And originally the formula had a quadratic time penalty or quadratic age penalty. And now we're kind of getting cubic because we're multiplying, or other measure with the squared age.
Right.
So maybe we have to take one age factor out or something. And we have to maybe, there's probably a way to, we can probably scale it that there's a factor so we can calculate time from the amount of impressions or something, right? And represent that as age and then multiply it with the other age factor.
I mean, that's what the 1.8 exponent in the Hacker News, in the current Hacker News formula does right now. I would suspect that this is just a tweaking to control the speed with which the front page rotates. So how quickly do you want stories to disappear? And if we just implement the formula the way that we thought about it, it would increase that speed because there is more time information in the denominator. So we probably have to dial this down.
I don't know, because if the article has constant quality, votes should increase with cumulative expected votes. There'll be variation, but you're right. We have two time factors in the denominator, but one of them sort of canceling out with the numerator.
But it's doing that right now as well, right? I mean, you have it in the numerator right now.
Yeah, upvotes is also a measure of time, kind of, or it correlates with time. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
I'm still not sure if that's really a problem, though. So it's something that we should think about, but it may still just work like that. Just has to be deliberate. So we can't just take the 1.8 and be done with it, I think.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, but I wonder if you can take cumulative expected votes and essentially, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about this. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think we need a simulation at some point, and then also like find a metric how quickly stories on the Hacker News front page right now rotate because of this formula, and then try to replicate this rotation rate somehow.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we can measure as well in the data, so we can see how quickly things rotate currently on Hacker News.
Yeah. Also, the that article about deconstructing the Reddit algorithm, it also kind of reverse engineers the time component. There's some variable like lambda, which indicates an assumption of how frequently people return to the news feed. But if that of course is very closely related to how frequently things should rotate. Maximizing the utility of a browser, it involves rotating at a speed that will make it most likely that they'll find something useful given this frequency of returning to the home page. In fact, I bet you could kind of reverse engineer that same lambda parameter for Hacker News, and I wonder if it's the same, would be the same number.
I mean, it's actually also a sensitive topic for the community, I think, because somebody also gave a feedback that they came to Hacker News mostly for the discussions, so they don't want posts to immediately disappear.
Yeah.
So it's lingering on the top page a little bit is a desired feature of the system, I think.
Yeah, and that would indicate that posts that have a lot of comments should perhaps linger.
I mean, that usually correlates with upvotes. Anyways.
I think sometimes you correlates, but I think there is a separate dimension there where there's an article that just engenders a lot of really interesting discussion, and that's what people come for. That's also something we can get from the data too.
Yeah, but I think it's still fine. We have this like something of good quality, and that's also something a formula we can derive. I'm not sure how, but the relationship between quality and attention that the story actually receives. Like, should we have like a linear relationship between quality and attention, or should we have something quadratic or whatever? Because like, do you want, if it has something has twice the quality, should it have received double the votes or quadruple votes? And not votes, views. Sorry. Yeah. Like, how much attention, if it's much better in quality, should it receive like proportional attention, or should it receive exponential attention?
Good question.
But is it, I mean, I'm still not sure how continuous quality actually is.
Yep.
So it might also be just binary, like this is good, this is bad. So
yeah, I mean, like that's the only mechanism or the only toolkit we give to the users right now. But the thing is, like, on average, on I don't know, through 1,000 users, then you have the average says no.
That would be interesting to give people the opportunity to vote between 0 and 1, not just 1 or 0 with a vote or not.
I mean, you have that 5-star ratings, basically.
Yeah. And that has some problems as well.
And then people are voting in different ranges.
Yeah. Like
IMDb had like an article about that people are they have to normalize their voting data because many people only vote in a certain range, like between 3 and 5 stars or something, and they never give 1 or 2 star ratings. But some people do. So how can we compare these different ratings? And then they normalize the data. And then,
That's interesting.
yeah.
A friend of mine told me that this is even a cultural thing. So she works at a company that has an online store, and apparently people from France never give 5 stars. Even if they are perfectly happy, they give 4 stars. And
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's the problem with the give them a range, because it creates other problems.
So we can ask, what are we trying to maximize or optimize for? And if we only have binary, quality, not quality, but that's not, votes are binary, but the number of votes is an indicator that something might be very, very high quality. But in the end, we're optimizing for value created for people, and or at least as they perceive it. And so I think if people do upvote something, it might mean that value has been created. Of course, then they might adjust where if we like the algorithm doubles the probability that you'll see an article that is of value to you, you might just raise your bar. And but in any case, I don't think that does it. That I think it still might mean that optimizing for total upvotes might be what we're trying to do here, and everything that we're in fact, we can even simulate that, right? Whether
I mean, it's actually, I think it's more complex than I thought. So what I just thought was, I think quality that we are operating under is you have, if every story was exposed to the attention of every user, how many votes would it get? So it's basically the fraction of users that would upvote a story.
mm-hmm.
And that's a number between 0 and 1. So you can perfectly sort it by that ratio. And that's basically what we think about quality. But what about, I mean, you have a global front page. So everybody sees the front page. And then you have variability between users, because there might be users that are completely dissatisfied with everything that comes to the front page. So you have to think about a measure like basically the quality of, or the average quality of experience of everyone, and that could be very different from the quality thing. Like,
well, value derived.
Collectively derived value. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, or aggregate derived value for the entire community.
Although that might be a too complicated. Maybe it's overcomplicating things, but just an idea that just popped into my mind.
I don't think so. I think it gives you a clear metric to optimize against. Even if it's theoretical, it gives you a model. And all we're doing is modeling. We're creating a model that we think roughly represents a part of reality and this online community. And I think it gives you a true north. It gives you some clarity. This is an optimization problem, and most optimization problems are about maximizing something.
And it's basically about maximizing quality on the front page.
Yeah, and quality or value derived, or a value experience.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably good to measure, when we do simulations, it may be good to measure several factors. So aggregated, collectively derived value against the overall fraction of users who would have upvoted a story or something like that.
Yeah, and what's the relationship between the two? It seems intuitively like if you sort by that fraction, I would be surprised if you couldn't prove that you also maximize aggregate quality derived.
It has to be related in some way. Like there has to be a linear relationship between the two, or like a,
I think so.
yeah, a correlation in some sense.
Yeah. So how much more of a rewrite do you think you're going to do with this?
Good question.
Yeah, I don't know. Right now, we're still like thinking about what to write because like so much is popping up, as we just realized.
Yep.
But we have to draw a line somewhere.
Yeah. I've been rewriting my distributed Bayesian reason article, and I think it's getting better. But I feel like I might be kind of driving myself crazy trying to perfect it. And a lot of what I've done is said, okay, well, I'll create several separate articles later with all these other things and have reams of partially written additional articles, and think something that's simple and understandable, and that will be appealing to that community. I think you have that, so you don't want to lose that by making it too much more complicated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we thought like of intentional leaving out the whole complexity thing and the whole how do we measure time and we just do the whole expected votes. We add expected votes to the denominator, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. I think a mistake I often make is I think, a really smart person that reads this is going to want an answer to this question. So I think let's answer that question. And you lose kind of sight of your audience, which is maybe even a smart person, but doesn't have much time. They're just going through it. The Hacker News audience won't necessarily always all read it. A lot of people will just read the comments about it, and then maybe they'll click to get some clarification about the comments. A lot of people will just skim. So I think it does have to be short, and then a lot of the details can be follow-up articles.
I mean, it has a lot to do with. So we are building a mental model of the system, and we are not synchronizing it with the community. I feel like this is what happened when we posted the last one to Hacker News. We basically synchronized our mental model with everyone else's a little bit.
Yeah, you got to do that. It's interesting. That's not how Hacker News was designed, but there's no way we can't use it that way.
Yeah.
It's like, here's V2. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. So what you guys just went through in this call today, you conveyed some key elements of your latest mental model to me very quickly. And it didn't take a lot. It took a few charts and a formula, and I got it. And that's because I have some background, but I think it means that this article can maybe be pretty simple, and just kind of go over the same steps. I think we probably need to refine that chart so it has the right arrows and the right pieces, and but I don't think
we could refactor the outline and then go from there, because like if you only work on the text, then it just blows up usually. And if it's not in the outline, it should not be in the article.
Yeah, and also I think it's good to do charts, outline plus charts, and then fill in the text at the very end, kind of like when the finishing of a home remodel.
Yeah. I mean,
this is taking so long, and every like we're meeting weekly, and every week like we have some new insights.
Yeah, I wonder. I think that might be just the way it works. I mean, there might be ways to be more efficient, but I also don't think you should despair. I think doing good work takes time.
Yeah.
How about your articles, Jonathan?
Well, I haven't made a lot of progress in recent weeks, mostly because of I've been personal things, not problems. I've just been doing a lot of interesting things. Been doing a little traveling and spending time with family. that's all good. I have a baby coming.
Wow.
Yeah, we're gonna have it in Spain. So this is gonna, of course, throw a wrench in things, and I'm a little, well, I'll be a little disappointed if I don't wrap up these articles before I'm put out of service when the baby comes for a while. I have, so the math has been, I wish I was better at math. Some of the conversations, things we were discussing even in this call, if I were better at math, I could immediately in my mind, you know, I could see the linear equation that relates total value to rank, and but I'm not so good at math, and I'm really having to dive into some more sophisticated math and study Bayesian inference, causal reasoning, some related, really make myself an expert in some of this stuff. And I think it's, you know, if I had a PhD in math, it would be a lot faster, because I'm dealing with, actually, when it comes to very complex argument trees, the model is a little bit complicated. If you have simple trees, you have a single thread, you know, that's simple. And I've worked out the math and how to compute it. It's very simple. When you have two parallel argument threads, and you're trying to infer from these two separate arguments, what is the probability that a random person who participated in both arguments would share this post or agree with it or whatever it may be. I think that there is a reasonable model for making that prediction, but it's tricky, and so I think at some point I need to maybe try to find some collaborators that are really good at this stuff, at the math, understand Bayesian inference, hierarchical models, and some of the new work, like Judea Pearl's work in causal reasoning. It was Marc Antoine that actually brought that up to me, and I've been reading his book. It's so closely related to what I'm doing, and I realize I need to master all of that to make sure that my model is really correct.
But please get it out to the world before you finish reading everything and trying to perfect it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I think
do it with your current knowledge, and then afterwards dive deeper.
Yeah, well, what I need to do is say, this is an unsolved problem. So, okay, solved it to this point, but now, you know, and it might be someone on Hacker News sees that and says, oh, here's a solution. So you're right. I need to maybe,
right.
I mean, that's what essentially happened to us when we got the feedback. It was like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And it was very, very helpful. Like,
yeah. So I think my overview is very good. I haven't implemented your feedback yet, Felix, but I will. That'll be great. I think it's very good. Maybe not, but I think it's good enough that I can maybe put it out there. It's, I pared it down a lot, and it conveys the basic idea. So yeah, I should wrap up what I have, even before finalizing the math. And I think putting that out on Hacker News is probably a good next step. Although I might ask maybe see if I can get a professor or somebody to give me a little bit of feedback before I put it on Hacker News, because it's still a little bit complicated.
Maybe Johannes Andre might know about it, because that was the advisor of my master's thesis, and it's also at the same chair where Johannes is working right now. And he's like really good in statistics math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think he might be interested in looking something like this?
I think so, of course, yeah. I talked to him about the Hacker News thing today as well. So I got his insights and I presented it to him.
What did he say?
He had some interesting things to say about the click-through leading to garbage optimization thing, because he thought that wasn't necessarily the case. I don't remember the argument exactly, but maybe we had it too clear in our head. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe next week, just a suggestion, why don't you just try creating another, I don't know if we're going to talk next week, but if we do, I could look at your outline and, instead of trying to rewrite it, and not necessarily even on a call, if you want, Justin, as a next step, to send me an updated outline, see what I have to think, and maybe some charts too, could be.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like, I think like now we like aggregated a lot of content and we have to structure it on a new outline and maybe the basic ideas in the outline to follow the whole thing. And that's what you'll look at, Jonathan.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
By the way, what other feedback are you looking for in the distributed Bayesian reasoning? Because I've read part, and I still don't get it, I think. So I still haven't understood it fully. So I wasn't able to write anything about it.
Well, I think, and that's important feedback. If there's a way I could present it more clearly. So one of the main comments Felix and others who have read it have suggested is that I even take out some of the discussion of how Bayesian inference works, and really stay at even a higher level, so that it's shorter, and so that people are curious. So I can just say, hey, look, Bayesian inference is a statistically optimal, theoretically optimal way of updating beliefs based on new information, without even describing how that works. The idea here is that this jury example is also updating beliefs based on new information. The new information is that the DNA evidence was invalid, and now there's a mathematical way of how the juror should update their beliefs about the verdict. It's very common sense in this case. If you based your guilty verdict on the belief that the DNA evidence was valid, and now that you have new information that says it's invalid, logically, common sense says you should perhaps change your verdict. Bayesian inference just gives you a mathematical formula for doing that in case of uncertainty.
Maybe I mean, one thing that I realized when I read it was that I think I lost track of the argument when the graphic came, because it contained all the information at once,
Oh, which graphic?
The first one where you have the argument tree, I think.
Can you quickly share it, Jonathan?
Yeah, and so you're talking about the part 2. Let me see.
Did I read part 2? I don't know.
So there's the introduction here. Let's see. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. How do I share my screen? There we go. All right. Hold on a second. All right. See my screen? So was it this one, or were you?
Or maybe, no, this wasn't the one that I read. Maybe I read a different one.
Maybe you read only part 2.
Yeah.
It's funny that you're writing. It's funny that you're writing
okay.
part 1 and part 2 at the same time, Jonathan. By the way, you want one to be in a high-level introduction, the other one more in depth, right?
Yeah, and that's because they were at first one, and now I split them. Now they've both grown. Is it this chart?
No, I'm not sure if that's even the post. Do you have another one on the same topic?
So I've got the let's see, there's the deliberative poll post. And then I've got another post on the argument model.
Yeah, that's the one that I read, the argument model one. I thought that would be a good preparation to understand the
right, but instead of preparing you, yeah. So, and the problem is once you get into the math. So for the introduction, high level introduction, you don't need all this terminology. But when we get into the math, I just realized I need to be able to define these terms. So I define this is like the CDL argument model. I'm using warrant instead of relevance. That's used more in argumentation theory. Although I'm still not 100% comfortable with that term. So I just define the terms. I use conclusion and premise, which are both types of claims. And the warrant is the unstated claim. So it's describing these terms, supporting and opposing arguments, premise and warrant arguments. That's important. An argument that is opposing or supporting the premise versus one that's opposing or supporting the conclusion. And then this terminology. So it's also, when I get into the math, I need to be able to, start use a lot of symbols. So just as terminology about how I identify premise and warrant arguments, and this is just like a graph. Here, and making a distinction, first of all, between the argument and its premises. So here, A is supported by B. B is the premise, and A is the conclusion. So I was just taking all these entities and making them very explicit in an argument graph. And then here's an argument that supports B. B is the conclusion and G is the premise. And I notate the argument as B arrow G. I'm going to change that notation. Realize the arrow should go in the other direction, but because the arrows point towards the conclusion in the chart, we should probably also in my notation. But it's very important to distinguish between, there's some real significance in the math, and the difference between an argument that supports or opposes the premise versus one that supports or opposes the relevance. And that's because of independence. If you're supporting or opposing a premise, you can go and have a completely independent argument about that premise. That premise can be used for it can be the premise of another argument. So you can carve off that entire discussion. When you're making an argument that opposes or supports the relevance, you can't carve that off into a completely different discussion in the sense that it has to happen in context. This argument, A arrow B arrow C, which is addressing the relevance of A arrow B, it's all in context. It's saying, that the defendant signed a confession is not a reason to believe that the defendant is guilty, and here's why. So it's part of an argument thread, and you have to follow the whole thread for it to make any sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think the problem that I had was I didn't know where to start analyzing this graphic. So because it contains a lot of information,
right?
Different colored arrows in different directions, different shapes, and I didn't know how to start.
Right. Are all the colors necessary? Like the colors for A, B, C, like the blocks, the background colors, is that necessary?
I just described that here. I felt like it's so premises, arguments have the same color as the premise that they're supporting. And what it does is it groups together arguments that have to be argued together in context. And so premises So this whole thread has to be argued together, this blue thread here. And this pink thread here has to be argued, together by the same group of people on the same, platform, right? Whereas G is a different color. It means the acceptance of G can be argued separately. But this article, I think if I make everything above more clear, maybe the chart will make more sense. Because this is a review of everything that I've introduced above.
Yeah.
And I've edited this since you read it, and maybe it's more clear since then. I hope so.
Yeah, I will definitely try to also read the distributed Bayesian reasoning articles.
Yeah, I'd start with the introduction. They're all linking to each other. I have an update that I haven't put up with some of your feedback, Felix. So actually, why don't I let you know when I've incorporated your feedback, and I'll let you two know, and then maybe you could, if you want to read it at that point.
Sure, of course, yeah.
All right.
This will help a lot. I mean, you could also, would be a bit funny to send the model article out to the CDL people and see what they have to say.
Yeah,
because everybody's super into modeling.
Yeah. I've made some decisions about definitions and that I needed to make in order to be able to even talk about the math. I'm sure.
And this is great because like everybody's like walking around it and not making a decision because we want the right decision right now, right? Everybody's looking for the right decision. And it's interesting to see why you made the decisions you made, for example, to everyone.
Yeah.
You can probably learn from that.
Yeah, maybe I just hope that I don't cause an aneurysm and cause anybody to have a heart attack.
It's gonna be fine.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, maybe I should I just send that to the group. Why not?
Yeah, get it out there because you want feedback and you want these to be good articles that are easy to understand.
Yep. Yeah. And so even if the rest of the CDL team doesn't want to adopt the same terminology, at least they could provide good feedback.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, I should probably go out and find some lunch.
Do you have 5 more minutes? Because then I can show you the what I did on the Hacker News data today. It's gonna be very, very quick because it's not much, but it's interesting because I analyzed the periodicity of the system.
Oh.
Because we have data and I wanted to know how it's like how stable it is basically week for week or week by week, day by day. And this is the last plot that I made, which was basically different weeks and how does, so this is the day of the week, so it's not a very good plot yet, but you can basically see that it's reduced on the weekend.
Yep.
The what?
The number of votes cast on that day. So the aggregate number of votes that are cast over the course of a day. And this is not so this is what I was working on before we started the call, but this is what I came up with in terms of actual things that happened. So I've looked into our data and I took out 3 weeks that we have complete coverage of, and I looked at
by our scraper. You mean? Yeah. Because that we scraped like every minute the first 90 stories of the front page, I think, and then like so we also see how they change and how much votes they gained and which rank every story was, the whole history, the whole rank history of the stories. Yeah.
And how long have you collected this data?
3 weeks, I think.
I think we have like 3.
Yeah, I think the longest chunk in consecutive data is 3 weeks. Yeah,
that's good.
And this is basically what it looks like. Like you have it's reduced towards the end of the week, and you have this periodicity over the day.
Yep.
But what I found very interesting, in 2 out of the 3 weeks, you had about double the amount of votes on Monday compared to the other days. And I thought this was like a Monday effect, but apparently it wasn't, because in this week it was not. But there are more outliers than I thought. So this is the second week that I looked at. And
but this looks like a measurement.
Yeah, this is a data error. Like this thing is a data error, because here this is just due to the way that we compute gained votes. So this should be, if you smooth it out, it would be a line like this. But this, I think, is not a data error. So you just had a lot of votes on that Monday. And apparently it's
Yeah, I think that could just be an article that is super popular.
Yeah.
And every once in a while you get these super popular articles, and it happened to be on a Monday.
Yeah. I think it was actually. So because I looked at the day, and there was an article with 4,000 points, I think, something around 4,000 points. So maybe that just absorbed all the votes, and it got a lot of attention. Some Supreme Court ruling on Google, and I think many people were very interested in it.
Yeah.
And here is the same thing. Like you have Monday and all the other days.
Yeah, that's really interesting, though.
Although, I mean, it might still be a querying error, because it looks suspiciously double the amount of the other things, now that I think about it. But I don't know. I mean,
yeah, it doesn't bleed over in other days is another thing. You'd think that the beginning of Tuesday might show the same effect. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it falls too steeply and rises too steeply at hour 0, it seems.
Maybe I made a mistake after all. Maybe I should look into. Yeah, maybe I should look into if something went wrong there.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is great data.
Yeah, we thought about letting the crawler run for a longer time frame in Amazon. So we have like lots of data, but right now we don't know what to use it for.
Well,
pretty much.
It can't hurt to have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I should switch it on again. But I don't know if we should also revise like which kind of data we crawl or scrape, because like what exactly do we need? Do we really need like the 90 top stories, or just a 30? What is a good time interval? Is really every minute or every 2 minutes good? Or I don't know. Have to rethink.
I don't know.
A bit.
I don't think you need to think too much. Probably, unless it's costing a lot of money.
No, you can just create a new Amazon AWS account and be with the free tier.
I think the parameters you've chosen for frequency and all that, I would probably just stick with them so that you have less complexity in your data and you got more consistency.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, good idea. Yeah, I should start it again. Okay, folks.
All right. Well, great talking to you guys.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll probably send you a outline on Monday, I guess.
Sounds good. And I'll send my updated drafts when they're ready, and then we'll talk.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk next week.
Sounds
See
good.
you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.